All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. And if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll turn it over to a roll call, please.
Mrs. Giller?
Yeah, excuse, sorry, my bad.
Mr. Pascal?
Here.
Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mrs. Dion?
Here.
Mrs. Carey? Here. Mr. Annaly?
Here.
And Mr. Miller?
Here. And I will turn this over to Ms. Peggy.
Welcome everyone. As always, we start with the pictures, and the first picture looks like a lot of fun. PE classes continue to get outside when the weather allows. And here are two students sledding down the hill at Harmony Hill. Just so you know, Mr. Van Dyke is offering me the opportunity to participate. I haven't yet, but maybe one of these days, Mr. Van Dyke, I'll take you up on that. The next picture is Ms. Pratt's high school math class during a lesson on factoring, and that brought back some memories. And then third, Mrs. Havens, 6th grade science teacher at the middle school, teaching a lesson on the phases of the moon. So as always, if you have questions, submissions for public comment can be emailed to boecomment@cohoes.org. So before we start our budget presentations with special guests from the elementary principals, I wanted to provide you with a few updates. So we are making some changes in our processes for notification of confirmed COVID-19 cases in our school community. This is to streamline that. So beginning tomorrow, we will not be sending notifications district-wide. Instead, parents will receive messages if there's a confirmed case, and staff will in their affiliated school. But all notifications will continue to be posted on our website. It'll be at the top of our COVID-19 updates and information rather than separate news posts for each one. But no changes are being made in how we communicate to families as part of our contact tracing procedures. You will get a call from the school directly. And then also an update, question was asked about COVID testing. So we have been preparing for COVID testing in our schools when it was a part of the microcluster zone strategy for our schools to remain open. We are not required to test currently. However, we are making plans to begin screening some students. We do have tests in-house, so our plan is to begin screening students at Cohoes High School following the February break. We had a number of parents consent for their child to be tested previously. 1 students are randomly selected. The high school will be reaching out to these parents on Parent Square to confirm that they still want their child tested. So I want to first of all thank Laura Tarlow, Tom Kay, and Sam McCullough, who is the high school nurse, for their thorough planning on this. We will be communicating by the end of the week about this. They believe they'll be able to test 10 students in a 15-minute time frame, and we're looking at potentially testing 30 students. 25 to 30. So then we will debrief after this and then use the feedback that we receive to plan future testing. Any questions? So now I'm going to turn this over to Stacy, who is going to turn it over to the principals.
So tonight we have our elementary principals joining us. We have our principal of Avon Lansing, Cliff Bird, our principal from Harmony Hill, Mr. Mark Perry, and our principal from Van Skyke Grade School, Jacqueline DiCero. So because Avon Lansing is listed first, we'll start off with Mr. Bird, please.
Well, it's pretty simple. We asked our staff what our building leadership team, what one of the greatest accomplishments we had this year. And we worked very hard to have a positive, caring environment for our schools. And even though this has been a challenging year, we feel like that we've still been able to maintain that here in our school.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. Mr. Perry?
Pretty much along the same lines. We've tried to make it as safe as possible, but yet a fun place to be. We want them to want to be here all day. That lends itself to, like Mr. Van Dyke doing the sleigh riding. There's a lot of different things that we're doing just because of the situation we're in. But I will tell you that the faculty and staff is just doing a phenomenal job. They're working day and night on making things right here at Harmony Hill. So.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Chairman?
At Van Skyke Grade School, when we started the school year and we knew that things were going to be different with face masks having to be worn and 6 feet distancing. And we know that things changed so much for the kids from March to the end of the school year. And we wanted to make sure that when we entered the school year, even though things were going to be different, because they had to be, we wanted them to be the same as much as possible. And I think that was the greatest accomplishment so far at Van Skyke, is maintaining all of our instructional protocols that we've done in the past years, that we continue to do them. They look different, but we're still doing them. And that we still are doing some of those fun activities that Mr. Bird and Mr. Perry mentioned, because we want kids want to come to school. So even though we can't do our school-wide Tiger Pride parties maybe the same way, we didn't cancel them. We didn't make them just, do them in your classroom. We still want to make them school-wide, so that with the entire community coming together to celebrate, we just have them look differently. And I think that was really important for our students as we came back to school and as we moved through the school year.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to challenges. We'll start again with Mr. Bird from Avon Lansing.
So we have talked before that as a school, we're on a list. And one of the things that we're most concerned about is student growth. So first of all, our classroom teachers are having a difficult time knowing what should be taught, only because they're so familiar with what's at their current grade level. They're not sure what's at the grade level below. So we're making sure that we're working this year on making sure our teachers know exactly what they should be teaching for students that are struggling. But if you're looking at student growth, we're also talking about those students that are above grade level. So how do we enrich those students that need to grow as well? We can't ignore the kids at the top of the heap. We have to make sure they grow as well. So our staff is also concerned about making sure that all of our students grow.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Okay. At first we were worried about COVID and keeping everybody safe, but now the academic needs are really starting to show. We're showing a big need where a lot of our when they're coming back to us, it looks like a summer regression times 4 from March forward. So a lot of those academics needs are showing. Our trouble is we don't have the AIS providers and the consultant teachers provided to help those kids in need. Right now, I have 1.5 AIS providers, and they are unbelievably seeing about 35 kids. We probably need to see about 80 kids for academic needs, but That's our biggest struggle right now, is to find out, like Cliff said, to identify the ones that need it and to also get those services to those kids.
And last but not least, Mrs. DeChara.
I think our greatest challenges for the year, outside of continuing to make sure that we're following all the safety protocols, are no different than the challenges that we've had in the past at Van Skyke, and that is, as Mr. Perry just mentioned, and I've talked to you last year at the same time about Van Skyke not having a dedicated AIS provider. We have a reading teacher, but no one who was a dedicated AIS for math or to help with the ELA. And you did approve for us to have that this school year, but because of the need for the distancing and different different classroom sizes, that AIS provider had to go back to being a classroom teacher. So even though you put it in the budget for us, and we were so grateful for that, we were unable to have it because of the distancing situation. So that continues to be our challenge, as well as the sharing of the school psychologists with Abram Lansing. We have 3 self-contained special ed classrooms down here at Van Skyke, along with students from kindergarten through 6th grade, and having a school psychologist that we only have in the building for 1.5 days a week does become a challenge at times, both for when we have students who are in need of those kind of services, but when we are doing testing, sometimes when a child needs to be do a special ed eval, the first time they're meeting the school psychologist is that when they're doing the evaluation. So that makes things a little difficult. So those are the 2 things, the biggest challenges at Van Skyke, which are no different than they have been in the past. Substitute coverage has been very challenging this year. They're just not out there. And that's one of the highlights of the year too, is the staff is stepping up this year and really being flexible and helping to cover when needed.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Mr. Bird, can you discuss your enrollment projections?
Sure. So when we look at current enrollment, all 3 of us, I did something slightly different, but all of our current enrollment includes the virtual students. So currently right now I have 3 classrooms of 15 in kindergarten and 12 students are virtual. In 1st grade, I have classes of 15, 13, and 14 and 6 virtual students. In 2nd grade, the classes sizes are all 15 right now with 18 virtual students. In 3rd grade, this is the big one. In 3rd grade, no, I'm sorry, I have 8 virtual students in 2nd grade. Sorry, I wasn't ready for this. In 2nd grade, all class sizes are 15 and 8 virtual students. In 3rd grade, 18, 17, and 18, we have 18 virtual students at that grade level. And actually at this point, I want to thank Jim Stapleton and his staff, because overnight, actually over a Friday and a Saturday morning, we moved a 3rd grade classroom from a regular classroom here in this building to an empty pre-K room, so we could fit 18 students in that class. So I have 18, 17, and 18, and the inn is full. We're actually worried that we may have another 3rd grader that wants to come in and we have no place to put them right now because of COVID restrictions and CDC recommendations. In 4th grade, I have 11 virtual students and class sizes of 15. And in 5th grade, I have 22 virtual students and class sizes of 14 and 15. So what we've simply done is move our current average class sizes down. So where you see I have 15 currently in kindergarten, or 57 in kindergarten, sorry, I moved 57 over to 1st grade. There are 5 students with special needs currently in kindergarten, 9 in 1st grade, 5 in 2nd, 10 in 3rd, and 7 in 4th grade. And I have 9 that are moving to the middle school next year in 5th grade. So the weighted numbers can be moved down, as well as the current enrollment numbers. And the average class sizes will be slightly different because we usually have our classes that have the special needs students smaller in number.
jump in there. All right, so Mr. Bird, a couple of questions. Well, I suppose it's mostly one question. What's the level of concern jumping from an average class size of 18 this year for the current third grade up to what'll be a weighted 26 next year with only 3 classes?
Well, we're starting to talk about that. Intermediate grades can usually handle larger class sizes, number one. We try to keep the numbers small in K1-2 specifically. Third grade is the big change, so we also keep numbers small there. We're keeping our eye on that to see if we have to shift people around. Right now, I'm not that worried. The biggest culture shock is going to be for everybody that's going to go from 15 and 16 students this year to, if we go back to a regular class sizes of 20 and 22, that'll be a culture shock for everybody. We are keeping our eyes on that, mostly because, thank you for bringing that up the last time when we were talking at the budget committee. But right now I feel comfortable that we're okay.
Do we have any additional plans to how we're going to handle that with the continued spread of ability levels within a single class?
Well, we're going to see that in every classroom, the spread of ability levels. And when we get further on in my request for the budget, you'll see that I'm asking for additional special ed staff, not specifically to work as special ed staff, but I'm looking for one special ed professional at each grade level, which will, I believe, help us in managing the spread, at least helping us work with the kids that are slightly behind where they need to be.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. Mr. Perry, can you discuss your enrollment projections next, please?
Sure. I did just about the same thing. Currently in kindergarten, I have 6 virtual kids. I have class sizes right now of 13, 12, and 12 with 6 IEPs in kindergarten. And that's just going to move down into 3 sections next year. My first grade this year is a big first grade. So we have 4 sections right now of first grade. That will be moving down to second grade. My first grade this year, I have 6 virtual. I've got class sizes of 13, 17, 13, and 12 with only 1 IEP in first grade. I'm not sure how that's possible, but currently there's only 1. So that 4th section, that little bubble is going to move to second grade next year. This year's second grade, I have 5 virtual. I have class sizes of 13, 14, and 14 with 4 IEPs in second grade. And third grade will remain at 3 sections next year. This year, I have 13 virtual out with Mr. Brooks, and we have class sizes in-house of 13s across the board with 5 special ed students in 1 classroom. In 4th grade, we have 2 classes. They're in 2 classes of virtual. I've got 13 4th grade virtual students, and I've got classes sizes in-house. My 4th grade is another big bubble. We had to, similar to what Cliff did, we had to, at the beginning of the year though, we moved Brenda Geis's class out of her classroom to the art room. So we're able to fit 20 kids in the art room. It's great because it's the only classroom that has 6 sinks, so everybody has access to sinks. But we have 20 in one classroom, we have 15 in another, and 18 and Mrs. Nash is maxed out, and we have 8 special ed students in 4th grade. For 5th grade, we have a lot of virtual students. We have 24 out with Mrs. Laughlin, and that's another big bubble. And in-house, we have class sizes of 13, 14, and 15 with 10 IEP students, which will be going to the middle school next year. And we have the 2 self-contains, which I anticipate, we're at 17 now. I anticipate possibly going to 16. There's supposed to be 811s, but we've been going 8 to 9 in classrooms as needed for the special ed self-contained. So no section increases, just that section of 4 will go from first and right up to second, and we'll watch that over the years to see if we have to bring that section downstairs to 3rd grade. We'll see.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Yep.
Mrs. DeChara, can you talk about your enrollment projections?
So Van Skyke right now we have 1 section of every grade level except for 5th. So kindergarten right now has in-person 15 students in it. 1st grade has 14 in-person. 2nd grade is at 15. 3rd grade is our low at 12. 4th grade has 18. And then my 5th grade is split into 2 homerooms, one with both with 9 in it. They were both at 11 at the beginning of the year, and we have lost a couple of students who have moved out of district, and that's why the number is low. We can't put them together because the classroom wouldn't be able to fit with the 6-foot distancing, so that's why we've maintained the 2 5th grade classrooms. Also, we have 4 students that are virtual in my 5th grade. So in case they come back in the 10 weeks as well, we wanted to keep the 2 5th grade homerooms. Virtually, so kindergarten has 3, 1st grade has 3, 2nd grade is at 1, 3rd grade 3, 4th grade has 5 virtual students, and 5th grade has 4. And my students virtually are kindergarten through 4th grade are with either teachers at Mr. Bird or Mr. Perry's class buildings, and I have a 5th grade virtual teacher here that have my 4, and then additionally Mr. Bird's 5th grade in it. So as you can see, the numbers just kind of, as they said, they just diagonal down. So I'm not looking or anticipating for anything. Hopefully, if we don't have to have the 6-foot distancing next year, just having 1 section of each grade level next year. Hopefully that will mean that I can have my 2nd grade teacher who was going to be the AIS teacher. She'll be going to AIS, and then the virtual teacher will become the 2nd grade teacher.
That sounds ideal to me.
Me too. So again, so if we, Advanced Skype, I could get my AIS teacher and it would be the same staff that I have right now.
I think that's important to mention that in terms of the teaching staff, it might be a shifting or a reallocation, but these are all within current staffing structure numbers.
So not a specific question for any single person, but how accurate are the projections for kindergarten right now? I was under the impression that we were trending significantly lower than what was posted here.
So we have been trending lower each year, and in a regular school year, we could definitely say, based on our numbers of 4-year-olds in pre-K, this is inaccurate. But with some parents not enrolling students in pre-K, we're not certain. So we need a little.
What's our current UPK 4 enrollment?
Jacqueline, what's our current UPK 4 enrollment?
We are, I believe the last time we discussed it, I believe we're at 78.
All right, so we're tentatively planning to pick up about 45 kids.
So at one point in time, we had more that were intending to come. Jacqueline, at one point, were we closer before everything happened, or has it stayed at 78?
No, we were closer. Right. If you remember, in the past few years, we've had 6 UPK 4 classrooms. This year we had gone into knowing we were going to bring that down to 5 because last year we did not fill the 6. So we intended on having 5 this school year. So we are at 5 right now. And again, we're not filled. We're about 12 short. I think if it was a non-COVID year, I think we'd be very close to filling that 90 because we did have parents who reached out at the very beginning of the year and withdrew their registration. So, but then we also have picked up some 4-year-olds along the way. So I think we would have been right about 90, if not a little bit more, if it wasn't a COVID year.
So I appreciate that you're planning for a full house, and I don't know that we're gonna know for sure until we have some guidance as to whether or not we can open in a more traditional way and what our restrictions are gonna be for next year. So I like that we're planning to be, at capacity, and then, worst case, we have extra adults to reallocate.
I know that my workplace is pessimistically looking at September for us going back into the office, but that's with a pessimistic eye. That was what they told us last month based on current levels of inoculation and everything. So who knows what that'll mean for the district, but just as a data point.
I think we can move on to the anticipated needs. Mr. Burke, can you review the anticipated needs for your building?
Sure. So these are the big asks. These are the things that we feel like we really need to continue the program that we have. Sorry, I already mentioned that I'd like to have a special education professional at each grade level, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most of my special ed staff right now are already working at 2 different grade levels. So if we are to keep them, we're able to keep them at 1 grade level each, they could also provide some of the services for our AIS students. We're also working to be proactive this year, trying to slow down the number of AIS kids and try to make sure that our students are getting where they need to be at the end of each grade level. That's a big goal that will be multi-year in the process, but some of the processes that we've been allowed to do because we're on a list may help us move that way even farther. We're looking at revising our math and science curriculum. So we did in Abram Lansing, I think each of the elementary schools put extra money in those spots. We always need social and emotional support. We need to make sure that we're providing for our students, especially if we do go back to in classroom. We don't know really what's been going on in the lives of our guys that have been home this entire year. We're always asking for technology, trying to stay ahead of the curve. It seems like we're always behind the curve. I already have one more projector that's on its next to last legs, and we have nothing to replace it with and no finances to do that. And we've created teachers now that are used to technology. So if we start to tell them they have to go back to chalkboards, that's going to frustrate everybody. Professional curriculum development, we're doing, looking at making sure our teachers know what they need to teach and when they need to teach it. And so we're always looking for in-service. And then finally, I'm not going to steal all of Mrs. DeChiro's thunder with this one, but Mrs. DeChiro and I share a school psychologist, and that's not, I have 45 students, actually I have 55 students total with 1 special ed classroom of students with special needs. And especially when it comes time to write reports and stuff, when you add the ones that Jackie has, she's like overwhelmed. We borrow from Harmony Hill at times to create reports. So all of our psychologist staff doesn't get to work full-time at any of their buildings. And the needs of our students mean that we really need to have someone in each of our buildings full-time. And Jackie will build on that when it's her turn. Mr. Perry?
I'm going to add to your sales pitch there a little, Cliff and Jacqueline. Having 1 full-time psychologist here, I have no idea how you guys do it with a part-time psychologist. It's absolutely incredible. I don't know how she can get all the work done. At Harmony Hill, we, like Jacqueline said earlier, last year we were lucky enough to be able to have another AIS provider granted to us in the budget. However, due to all the new regulations and new protocols, that was absorbed back into a teaching position. So we've been rethinking it. We've also all along here needed more consultant teacher time to get to our most needy students. So we are going to switch that AIS position to a consultant teacher / AIS provider. So there's going to be years where we're going to need that person to be full consultant, but there are going to be years where that consultant teacher would be able to provide some AIS to other students in the classroom. We're looking at how that will look. One of the things that we're looking at is the possibility of stationing that person in kindergarten alone and getting those kids right fresh up reading and get them as strong as possible right away. Math and science, like Cliff mentioned, we are all putting new emphasis on math and science, and Peggy's been helping us with that curriculum as well. Social emotional support, we're finding the social emotional needs of our students is great right now. We see it as just increasing. We also have to worry about the social and emotional support of our adults as well. But the demands on our families, the demands on our students that come in every day, we really need to try to support them. It's very, very difficult. Mrs. Marshall cries just about every day because she can't give her Marshall hugs. So the social and emotional support is almost a full-time position right about now. We are looking for. We've been using a phonics. We've been using a foundations program, which is a phonics program. It's research-based, and it's a daily program that kindergarten, first, and second grade would use. We used to have it. We have dribs and drabs still in the building. We've been reproducing some of the things that we've lost over the years and so forth. But we're looking to research some programs that that could add a different layer, a level of phonics and phonemic awareness support into our classrooms. We're looking forward to researching the programs and seeing which would work best for our building, and potentially piloting something, which leads us to the next thing, which is progress monitoring tool. With the foundations or the phonics program, we really want to monitor it and see how our kids develop with it. So we're gonna try to find a progress monitoring tool that makes sense for us, that can show us the most data that we need. One of the things that we're finding out now too this year is that we really are going to have a little bit of a lack of data. We want the assessments, but we don't want the assessments. The assessments are a data point. But we're looking for a progress monitoring tool that can help us get some data points. Technology, the classrooms have fun with me when I walk into their classroom and take apart their interactive board, their projector, because I know that they're all overheating, and I know that I have to get all the dust out of the grates on them. So in the middle of the class, the teacher will call me, and I'll go down and I'll use a vacuum and get the dust out of it, so the interactive board, the projector, will work. My worry, as Cliff mentioned, is I don't know the lifespan of those projectors. Every day I walk by and I see something flicker, and I kind of just run away from that room because I know that there's another one maybe biting the dust. So we're looking to replace those with the interactive boards, the Dell screens, if you will. And Chromebooks, I'm very happy to be able to say that Sylvie gave us a Christmas present today. He brought the third graders, anyways. Third grade, starting tomorrow morning, will be 1-to-1. Now in Harmony, we have third, fourth, and fifth grade 1-to-1 with Chromebooks. And that allowed me to move the remaining Chromebooks that we have. It's exactly 90. And those are going to be utilized by kindergarten, first, and second grade upstairs. So they're thrilled, and third graders, I hope they're watching, but they're still going to be excited when I want to pull into the rooms tomorrow with my grocery cart full of Chromebooks for them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Shara?
So, yes, I have already mentioned the AIS provider, so I'm not going to talk about it again. And my two colleagues have already mentioned that math and science with next gen standards, that we are looking at our math. Right now we use Go Math. So working with Ms. O'Shea, we're looking at what's the best way to go for next year. So we're going to be working with our teachers for that, as well as the new science. We used to get our kits from BOCES, and now we're really moving to the Smithsonian science. So we're learning more about that, and the teachers are learning how that program is working and getting what they need, materials and supplies together for that. The social emotional supports, I think, go along with the psychologist conversation. We are lucky that we are in our second year of doing the second step program here at Van Skyke. And that, I think, has helped tremendously with our social emotional support for our students. But that's kind of like, when I think of a tiered model, that's kind of the tier 1 model, because we're giving it to everyone. And that's the full-time school psychologist will really be targeting those second and third tier students who need that extra support. Right now, I do have a social worker who does her very best. But again, I have 41 IEPs in my building, and I have the school psychologist for a day and a half. So when it comes time for annual reviews, when it comes time for testing and things like that, her entire time is consumed by that. There's very little time left over for actually working or consulting with the children. So those kind of go hand in hand. And I would like to say also, with the second step, we were lucky at the beginning of the year at Van Skyke to be part of a pilot trial program where it was a second step for our adults in our building. So we did run with that at our faculty meetings on September, October, November, December at each of those meetings. And second step had a program for the teachers to talk about resiliency and them coming back and having focus on them taking time to reflect on how they're feeling, what the changes that had to be made, and taking time to celebrate the things that were happening were good for with them in their classroom and their professional life, as well as at home, and just really taking time for self. So I thought that was really good that we were able to do that. And I think the second step program is being very successful, helping our students as well. Technology, as mentioned already, the Chromebooks are great. The students love using them. Classes, kindergarten through 5th grade, are using them every single day. But when you have limited numbers, it's a scheduling, the teachers are sharing and really saying, okay, how long are you going to have them for? So I think they would be used more if we had more. And I do know that Van Skyke is in a better position right now because of our numbers, lower numbers, but we our ratio is better than Abram, Lansing, and Harmony. But now I think they caught up with the numbers they've received this school year, and we haven't received any. So we would like more, as well as our interactive whiteboards. As they have said, they are dying. Their lifespan is near its end. So we do need to make sure that we have the Dell boards available when they go. And then the progress monitoring tool. When I first became principal, we started using what was called DIBBLES back then, which really helped us zero in on the foundational skills that the students need, the foundational reading skills. So we used that for a number of years, and it was really helpful, I thought, because the teachers had a pulse on where the students were. Every week or 2 weeks, they were using that progress monitoring tool on the students who were at risk. And we knew the names were on the board in our conference room. So we had an idea, and we knew who those students were, who we needed to keep an eye on, who was receiving services. We moved away from DIBBLES and we went to AimsWeb, and now we don't have either one as we moved into our new reading series. So I do believe that it is really important that we do find that progress monitoring tool that can be used not only by our special ed professionals, but by our classroom teachers, because our classroom teachers were using DIBBLES and they did find it helpful and meaningful to have that data in front of them for our struggling students. So I would like to have something again that helps the teachers have that information, that data at their fingertips every week or 2 weeks when they were doing the progress monitoring on their students. And then, of course, as already mentioned, the professional and curriculum development, which goes along with math and science. And we need to have everyone up to speed on next gen, and then the full-time school psychologist. I think we have kind of laid out why we think that's so important. Cliff, Mr. Bird and Abram Lansing, they definitely need to have that full-time school psychologist at Abram Lansing. In Van Skyke, we have the 3 self-contained classrooms. So we do need more school psychologist time.
I think before we move on to the revenues, I would just like to say thank you to each of the elementary principals, as well as the teachers and the building leadership teams. I know it was a tremendous amount of work, and to compile all the data, and to collaborate with the budget committee, and to prepare for tonight's meeting. So thank you to all. Any questions from any of the elementary principals?
I did want to jump in.
I'm sorry, Mrs. DeChero, was the timer to going off, meaning your time was up?
You're done.
I wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate the format of the conversation and presentation this year. I think it, we always know that there are needs, but I think this very clearly articulates those needs very well. And I'm appreciative of that. I think this is familiar from those of you that were in the budget committee meetings, but I think we're going to be very lucky if we're able to budget next year at the same funding levels that we were this year. And so the name of the game, as was iterated in the first need slide, is going to be shifting resources. And that's very difficult, but we're going to need to take a very close look at the way we've done things for a long time and programs and things that we've always had. And as these other needs arise, they may start to outweigh the way that we've done things in a long time. And don't read too much into this. This is just an off the cuff idea, but fundamental shifts like, maybe we'll have 4 days of in school and then 1 day where it's completely remote and we shut down the building. What kinds of very large systemic changes can we be looking at ways that we've done things forever that maybe we can shift, and maybe then we can offer social emotional support, and that is more important than the way we had done things before and provides a better value to our students. And so I would just encourage everyone to, the best you can, take your mind out of how the way things that have done always, and think especially about how we can fit in some of these needs, because they are so high. And are there other things that they overshadow, and we could replace other things, because it's not going to be a case specifically within the next year or two, I feel, where we're just going to be able to add, and that's not going to be, I'm speaking like Stacy here for a moment, but we're not going to just be able to add things. Unfortunately, that's not the situation that we're in. So that's all.
So I just wanted to jump back. Somebody I think Jacqueline made the comment that her remote learners were with Mr. Perry, Mr. Bird's students, or classrooms, remote classrooms. That's the kind of creative thinking that I think we're gonna have to do going forward. So thank you very much to all 3 of you and district admin for being willing to think outside the box and make sure that we can meet the needs of all of our learners without stretching the limited resources that we have.
I have a question, if I could, before we move on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Curriculum came up quite a bit, and at the onset, Mr. Bird mentioned, if I understood correctly, that there was uncertainty or questions from one grade level as to what was occurring the grade level prior. Could you help me understand that? And is that a concern from all elementary schools, the communication from grade level to grade level?
Mr. Bird?
I got it.
to
Sorry.
Mr. Burr.
I asked 3 questions and nobody answered them. And I'm like, oh, that's because nobody heard. No, I think, Mr. Pascal, one of the things, and I will speak for my cohorts unless they jump up and start screaming at me, but we have been very dependent upon resources. In other words, we've been dependent upon the books that we bought rather than taking the time or having the time, is probably the best way to say it, of really understanding what the standards are. And over the last year, we've become very aware, some thanks to Ms. O'Shea's guidance and understanding that we need to really know what the standards are. And some of my staff's concern was simply that if we were using the textbooks, they only have the 4th grade textbook. And if a student's not at the 4th grade level, then what do? Do we actually go back and borrow the 3rd grade textbook? I think the best thing for us to do is understand what the expectations are at each of the grade levels and be able to teach from there, not necessarily be dependent upon the resources that we have. So I know you're getting ready to ask me a question, but all 3 of us mentioned math, right? Our Go Math is up this year. We could extend it 1 more year if we want to. I'm not sure that's fiscally responsible, but all of us have thought, do we really need to Go Math, or are there other resources we can use to help us teach the standards as opposed to teaching Go Math? And that's a sly change, but I think it's an important change, especially if we're being held accountable to the state for our students' growth. Then we need to make sure that we're teaching specifically what the state asks us to teach and not what a textbook asks us to teach.
So
If I could also just mention, as we entered this budget year, all curriculum development monies were cut from the budget, so teachers have not had time beginning last summer to meet. As there are PLCs after school. We haven't had our regularly scheduled grade level meetings even virtually because there's such a substitute shortage that it's hard to plan on. So those are some of the things that have played into this. So I think that the time and the ability to meet, I mean, we're hoping that in the spring we can have virtual grade level meetings because perhaps our substitute situation will be better. And again, very fiscally responsible grade level meetings, but still. So so that adds to this too, because the best way to learn is together and through collaboration. And so Avon Lansing has been afforded some of that time through school improvement grant funds, and we need to. And we're working on plans to expand that to other buildings.
Mr. Pascal, go.
no, so I'm thinking about two issues. One having to do with, if I have this correct, there's uncertainty as to the expectations from the state education department with respect to curriculum. We're not quite sure what they expect of us. Is that part of it?
No, we haven't. Well, first of all, in the last 4 years, the standards have changed twice, right? So we really haven't had the time to clearly look at what the standards say we're supposed to be doing at each grade level. And that, I think, is going to be a major change. At least it's part of our process because we're on a list, or as Ms. O'Shea says so professionally, a school improvement. Which I should probably say too, because that sounds much better. But we just haven't taken the time to make sure that our teachers are clear in what exactly they're supposed to teach. So they've been dependent upon the resources that we've given them. And that is not the best way in what we do.
But I would think that a big piece is just communication, where grade level meetings, so that the 3rd grade teachers are speaking to the 2nd grade teachers about where they started and where they stopped, and how I'm probably being simplistic about it, but I'm concerned about do we have a structure in place that brings about communication grade level to grade level? So if I'm in one grade, I know what happened the grade before and what's expected as the students leave me.
Correct. Well, and Ms. O'Shea put in place for all of us a way to hand off our students at the end of last year, but I think I'm being more individual specific. So we have a student that's not exactly on grade level. These would be like our AIS students. What can my classroom teacher do to help them out? So you're thinking more globally, as in what is this group of 25 kids learned last year and what do they need to know this year? I think we're very good at doing that. We're talking more diagnostic work as to what specifically do some of our students need. And that requires a little more knowledge as to what the skills are before and after our specific grade levels. But frankly, go ahead.
There's a structure in place whereby the teachers are communicating with each other across
Absolutely.
various grade levels.
It can be better, as can all things.
Yeah.
But yes, there is a structure in place.
Yeah, and Mark, years ago, well, actually 2 years ago, the best meetings we've ever had were vertical meetings, vertical grade meetings, rather than just second grade meeting horizontally. We would have first and second meet, and then second and third and fourth. They'd meet simultaneously. And the trouble is, like Peggy mentioned, the fact that I would need 8 to 10 substitutes a day, and just the last 2 years, we just have not been able to have that. But they're able to. I mean, these guys are so flexible. They're talking to one another on their own. It's not as structured as we would like it, but they're definitely getting together and talking about what each grade needs. So the communication is there, but it could get better.
Thank you.
I would say, and I would just add quickly, I think that's maybe one of the advantages of my building for my classroom teachers. I know there are a lot of disadvantages of being at Van Skyke and being the only one, especially when we're talking about achievement, test scores. When you see the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade test scores, you know who it is at Van Skyke. But when we talk about curriculum and knowing what has been taught and, the grade below you, when we had those meetings that Mark and Cliff were talking about, my teachers, that's when they meet, they have to meet with teachers from the other grade levels. So I think that has been a positive for the Van Skyke teaching community here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
We're going to move on to revenues. All right, revenues. First, I want to start off with these are preliminary figures. So these figures are subject to and will change. The first 3 lines, state aid, building aid, and federal aid. The source of those lines really come from the executive budget proposal from New York State, and we'll talk about that. We talked about it the last time we met, but we'll talk about it again in some detail. So really what we should be paying attention to is you see the dollar change column, and you see a shift in resources from state aid to federal aid, and that's really attributed to the financial condition of the state and the stimulus monies that are included in the executive proposal. That's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The next 2 line items, property taxes and pilots. So again, you see a large negative number in the pilots for dollar change and percentage. This is attributed to the Brookfield pilot. So the Brookfield pilot is coming to an end. It was on a payment schedule. This is the final year. So that property will be added to the tax roll. And so what that means is instead of Brookfield paying a lump sum for the pilot, they're going to be added to the tax roll, and they will share in the burden of the tax levy. So the property tax levy, the 6.8%, that sounds a little overwhelming. But again, it's attributed to the Brookfield, and the tax rate, the impact on the amount paid per $1,000 is less than 1%. It's a 0.9% based off of our estimates. And it is, current year tax rate is 37.57. The estimate is 37.91. So again, less than a 1%. What that would mean for a homeowner with a property with $150,000 value, it would be just over $2 a month and just over $25 for the year. So again, this is based off of our most up-to-date estimates on the next year's tax roll, and that is with Brookfield moving from a pilot and being added to the tax roll next year. The next line item is consumer utility taxes. That was adjusted for trending purposes, a slight decrease. The next line item, refunds, tuition, and other, that's trending extremely low. We had a large refund from our cluster season in the current year, or sorry, rather in the prior year. And donations and tuition are much lower this year. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll adjust that if things start to look better throughout the budget process. Interfund revenues is the next line item, and I'll combine that with fund balance. So we've talked about for a number of years now that historically we did balance the budget really depending on reserves and fund balance, and that is not a good long-standing practice in order for us to remain financially stable. So we needed to get away from that, and we started to get away from that. So next year's budget, you'll see $160,000 for reserves. That's only the MLR reserve, which that'll cover our retirement incentive payments that we've had a number of retirements for next year. So that's appropriate use for that reserve, and no planned use of fund balance. So no planned operating loss for next year. What that would mean is, based off of these preliminary revenue numbers, the overall budget would decrease by 2.78%, $1.2 million. So difficult situation. We'll talk more about the executive proposal on the next slide. Again, the state executive proposal is assuming two stimulus. One is approved and one is unapproved. So that's kind of a game changer if that doesn't go through. Are there any questions on the preliminary?
Kind of. Are we trending on this year's budget against actual versus budget
So for revenues,
in general?
so expenses, I mean, we're trending favorably because we have quite a bit of mid-year adjustments. We have some good news in the smart schools area. We did receive our first payment, $132,000. We received it yesterday, so that was for our first round of Chromebooks that we purchased almost 2 years ago. So I'm very grateful that we received that money. I'm very happy. So now we can submit the payment for the cameras and we can move forward. So that's great news for our technology. We did have, the withholds for over the summer and early fall. From what I understand, we should receive those payments. I'm not sure about the timing. It's not clear when we'll receive those payments, so that can skew our revenues.
Before the end of school year?
I'm hopeful before the end of the school year, yes. We also did start to receive a lot of our grant funding. So that's all favorable news, and we can talk about, we didn't plan on talking about this tonight, but we can start to talk about current year needs and adjusting some of the expenses based off of our current year needs based off of our trend. So good news in that area.
Just a question about the pilots. You said Brookfield is coming after the pilot, going back onto the regular tax roll. Is that for definite? Is Brookfield able to, or have they spoken about reapplying for the new pilot? Is that?
So to my understanding, there is no discussion about a new pilot. There might be a tax certiorari case if they decide to challenge their assessed value that we handle through the city.
Okay.
And that could likely occur.
And for a homeowner in the city, just for their school taxes, is it better that they state that Brookfield are on a pilot, or is it better that they come onto the tax?
It's better that they come into the tax roll.
Okay, so homeowners, people in the city would want them onto the tax roll.
Yes, it's good news.
Stacy, I have a question about the state aid.
Sure.
Okay, well, I just read an article a couple weeks ago. The governor is talking about if we do get more federal monies now, well, eventually, that the fiscally stressed urban districts would receive more state aid. So are you just being cautious there with the $2 million from this current year going, and then next year dropping to 18?
No, that number represents the actual executive run. So it's the numbers that were reported on the executive run.
Okay.
If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about the factors, and that might answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So really the talking points for the executive proposal are, again, the foundation aid is frozen for the second year in a row. So you know that according to the formulary, we're not fully funded. So that's bad news for us. It's bad news for other districts. There's a new category, it's called services aid, and this isn't a very transparent model. It's consolidating 11 of the expense-driven aids into one, and then it's also applying a reduction factor based off of your enrollment and your wealth ratio. So a lot of the large aid categories are commingled or condensed into this, including BOCES aid, transportation aid, hardware aid, software aid, our library aid, and our charter school aid. So I'm hopeful that that does not go through, that again is not a favorable to districts. Probably the most concerning item, personally, in my personal opinion, is that the STAR aid was added to the run. STAR is, as most folks know, it's a New York State subsidizes. It's a discount that's offered on your tax bill, and New York State subsidizes that. So that's a levy revenue that is not accounted for as a state aid revenue. And so what they did is they added the STAR aid, and then they added this new reduction called a local district funding adjustment. And the way the local district funding adjustment was calculated, it's the lesser of the STAR or the federal stimulus. So for us, it's the exact amount of our STAR payment. So that's concerning. Again, I hope that doesn't stick. Carissa Act, so this is federal stimulus monies. So Sue, for the line item, for the state aid line item, the first three things I just discussed are accounted for in the state aid number. So it's the reduction, it's also the impact from the services aid and the foundation aid being frozen. And then the federal aid category, that's where you see the Carissa Act. So that's where you see the positive number. The only difference is Medicaid is also included in that number. So that's where that is accounted for. So the top three are in the state aid number, and the last one is in the federal. So the federal stimulus funds, these are, again, we're going to have to apply for these funds. For us on the executive run, it was 1.8 million. It is the two-pronged categories again. It's going to be the GEAR and the ESSER funds. So we'll apply for them. My understanding is it will be, we'll be able to use operating expenditures through this funding mechanism. Probably the most unsettling piece of the executive proposal is that it's assuming that the state will receive $6 billion in stimulus monies that have not yet been approved.
Right.
So that's the wild card really at this point. The state really needs fiscal relief, and this is a multi-year issue. I don't think this is a one-year issue. So we do have Assemblymember McDonald joining us the next time we meet on the 24th, and he'll be giving us an update on the state budget during that time. Sue, did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions on the executive budget?
So the bottom line is, with all the numbers we currently have, we'd be like $1.2 million short of where we were before?
Yes, of the current year.
Okay.
The preliminary tax cap calculation. So this is a 15-step calculation. It's lots of fun. It's due to the Office of the State Comptroller on March 1st of each year. So I've input all the figures into the database. I have not yet hit submit. So the calculation is $17.1 million. It is a 6.8% increase. And again, that is attributed to the Brookfield pilot. Just talking about some of the factors, adjustments, and exclusions so that everybody understands how this is calculated. One of the components is the tax-based growth factor, so that is unique to each district, and it's basically the percentage difference between your tax, it's the growth in your tax roll year over year. So for us, it's 1.0032. This is provided by the Department of Taxation and Finance, and this number, this percentage can change up to the time that I submit. So that's why I'm saying this is preliminary. That's one of the reasons, because that number can change. It shouldn't change the materially, but it could change. We talked about Brookfield and the reduced pilot receivables. So pilots are a component of the tax cap, right? Because if you're collecting the revenue through a pilot, then you shouldn't be collecting it through taxation through the levy. So it's one or the other. ERS and TRS, so those are our retirement contributions. So in order for it to be an exclusion, it would have to increase by at least 2%. So that's not the case. So we don't have any exclusions this year. And then the allowable levy growth factor. And many years ago, folks would think that this was a 2% tax cap. And that's why they thought it was a 2%, because it's the lesser of 2% or CPI. So CPI is 1.23% this year in this calculation. So obviously less than 2%. And then there's the capital exclusion component, and that is allowable. It's basically the differential between expenses, your capital expenses, and your building aid. So that's 100, I'll call it 162,000. So again, the tax rate based off of our best estimates is less than 1%. And the estimate is 37.91, and that's from this current year of 37.57. Again, on a house that is assessed at $150,000, it would equate to just over $2 a month and just over $25 a year. So again, the tax rate, less than a 1% increase. Now, the next time we meet, we will be presenting on special programs, information technology, and buildings and grounds from an expense side of the house. We'll have our update from Assemblymember McDonald on the state budget, and then we'll have a final discussion about the tax cap before we hit submit to the Office of State Comptroller on March 1st. Do you have any questions about anything that we talked about tonight?
Thank you, Stacy. I thought that was really comprehensive, and I appreciate all the information. It might be because it's my 10th budget, but I feel like I'm starting to understand a few things. Were there any other items as far as presentation topics or items? Or shall I move on to the regular agenda topics?
Looks like we're set.
Okay. Is there any board discussion of anything on the agenda?
So I just wanted to say how extraordinary our staff is for stepping up and volunteering to do things that are in the best interest of our kids. And we're approving these volunteer positions. It's unbelievable what they're doing for our kids and extraordinary. And I wanted to just say thank you and how blown away I am to see this.
Could I just mention that we have teachers on the agenda for their retirement, and I just wanted to mention their names. Lisa Ethier, Kim Fitzpatrick, Laura Schwartz, and Elaine Weisland. And I've worked with you all a number of years. Thank you for all your years of dedicated service. We will miss you. We're all going to miss you. And then I also want to recognize that there is someone newer to us who is receiving tenure tonight, and I'd like to congratulate Ms. Leah Miller.
I just want to take 1 second to also recognize one of our cleaners that has worked for us for many years, who is retiring from the high school, Ms. Paula Ahern. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, thank you to those that are volunteering, and thank you to all the years of service for our students, and all the work that you've done for the community of Cohoes, for the teachers and the cleaner that are retiring. So thank you. I don't have any community comments directly related to the agenda. With that being said, and no other board discussion, I'll take a motion from the board for tonight's consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Mr. Pascal,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dion,
Yes.
Mrs. Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Annaly,
Yes.
and Mr. Nolan.
Yes. With that, are there any questions or comments from the board on any topic at all? I do have a handful of community questions. Let me just pull them up here. So I'll start with a couple of questions or comments from Kevin Kolakowski, which I'll start with the first one, which reads as greetings, BOE members and district leadership. Now that the second semester has begun, are there plans to evaluate the effectiveness of the current instructional plan as it relates to pros and cons of this model throughout the last 5 months, as there are still 5 months ahead of us? Metrics such as attendance, class passing rates, public survey, staff survey, student survey are merely suggestions for what may be used for such evaluation at all levels, K through 12. Clearly, September was still crisis mode, where school families, staff, and students were struggling to figure out what model would serve students best as it related to the world as we knew it from technology, budget, COVID regulations and mandates, restrictions, and schedule. We as a society have come far since then. We now know more and can adjust accordingly. The opportunities to grow, amend, and expand the instructional plan to benefit student learning and maximize staff instructional capacity has never been more great and is not an opportunity that we should pass on. Thank you for your consideration.
So,
Go ahead, Ms. O'Shea.
Yes, so we have been working with principals, Katrina Hunch, who's our district data coordinator, and we're in the process of gathering attendance data, including mandatory absences, course passing rates across the buildings, also other achievement data, and we'll be compiling that in kind of a state of the district report. And also a survey was mentioned, so the idea of gathering perspectives from a midpoint survey could be very valuable. Karen Square makes the administration of a survey much easier. It would be helpful for us to also hear from staff to see what their needs are and how we can support, and to hear from parents too as how we can support what their needs are and their thoughts as we're now at the midpoint. Any other comments?
If we do go the survey route, I would suggest that we follow some of the same things that we've done with the administrators, where we're, what's good and what's a challenge. Because I think we'll find that some things that we've been forced into have come out as unexpected positives, versus obviously some things are truly a pain. And to understand both sides of the coin. Any ballpark expectation on when we'll be getting some of those metrics that you mentioned?
I'm hoping to get them to you soon. I'm not quite certain if Friday is too soon, for definitely.
Within the next couple of weeks?
Yeah,
okay.
Within a week or two.
We're also meeting with a high school principal on Friday to talk about Operation Graduation.
Yep, we're meeting with a high school principal today also. Thank you. last meeting I talked about all the meetings, so why don't you not talk about meetings? So I'm meeting with Laura Tarlow, and then had some conversations with Dan Martinelli today, and then we have a teacher leader meeting right after break. So those are key others to get them.
I just wanted to agree that I think a survey is a great idea. We have the survey that we've now done for 1 or 2 years that we're required to do now at this point, I believe. And that's much broader, larger, but I think something more specific here in these circumstances could really be beneficial. So I think that that's a step in the right direction.
This will be targeted to this period of time and learning. Yeah, that's the school climate survey that we're required to do.
Another comment was, I currently have 3 children enrolled in Cohoes City's district, a daughter at the intermediate level, 8th, and 2 sons at the primary level, 1st and 4th. At the intermediate levels, with an asynchronous model where students are in person every other day, they are left to their own devices to seek, find, and complete assignments on days that they are not in session on campus with minimal, if any, instructional support. That said, many teachers are following the same scope and sequence that they would follow on a normal year outside of this pandemic. Is this the expectation, or should teachers be focusing on essential learnings and power standards that are foundational for student understanding at a pace that is more appropriate to the model of every other day instruction? If maintaining the instructional model of a normal year is the expectation without the instruction or support on virtual days, how is the district preparing for a clear learning gap that is all but inevitable with this model, which essentially will set students up to struggle with content assessment, comprehension, and overall understanding in their classes in this current year and beyond due to current pacing, rigor, and lack of direct instruction, feedback, and discussion with the classroom teacher throughout the year?
So the reason our current hybrid model has half of the students in one day and half of the students in the other day due to social distancing. So when the students are home on their asynchronous day, the teachers aren't teaching during those periods of time, another group of students in front of them. We understand that nothing would be better than 5-day in-person instruction, and just very hopeful that in the future, next year, that we can get back to that. To address the question about teachers and content and what they're teaching, so in a hybrid model, teachers met at the beginning of the school year at the secondary level, and they also had staff development days throughout the year, as well as department meetings where they have looked at the curriculum. They've looked, so for example, at the middle school, they have looked at the priority standards, looking at the OC's essential ed curriculum, and then they have adjusted it to, adjusted their curriculum to look at these standards. They also looked at gaps from March on and had discussions between grade levels as to what the gaps are in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade so that they could focus on skills in that area. At the high school, we are still preparing as if regions are going to be offered. We have not heard yet if they will. There are waivers. One might be to waive entirely, one might be to not have them count towards accountability. But so at the high school, what the teachers have done is they've looked at those frequently occurring strands and high leverage points that have been on Regents exams, and then they have adjusted their curriculum accordingly. And again, they've also looked at skills in those areas, and they're continuing to do this. The next day that they'll be looking at this is March 4th and the next staff development day.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but at the moment, there's been, I think it's very obvious and across the state that this is going to be a large issue, that there are going to be these learning gaps to what we typically thought of as we wanted people to accomplish in these grades and things. That's not, we're not going to hit those bars across the whole state. But to this point, there haven't been discussions about how they're going to address that as far as what levels are going to be expected for schools or teachers to hit with their classrooms. Is that right? We have no guidance as to what the for Regents, is it going to be like, do you need a 45 to pass instead of a 65, or like what kind of accommodations or changes there'll be? There's none of that, right? Is that correct?
We haven't received any information from that. We still have our measures of progress that were set by the state a while ago in terms of targets, but we haven't received word of any adjusting. You will hear throughout the budget presentation that we are planning in terms of looking at gaps. You heard from the elementary principals. When you hear from both Dan and Laura, you'll hear Dan talk about iReady, which is a program which will help us identify both areas that need to be addressed in terms of gaps and areas that need to be enriched. And then, as Stacy just mentioned, we're starting those discussions with Loyal too. So we are planning both for the remainder of the year and then for next year.
Yeah, I think this is, these are very good questions from Mr. Kolakowski, and I think that it's doubly important as the entire state enters this area of fiscal stress. We can't just double down and say everyone's going to meet the same expectations that we had set before. So it's not going to be an option, and we just here, at least in Cohoes, we're doing what we can, but we don't have all the answers yet. And certainly nobody at the state level is, providing any of those answers yet either.
Also, if I may, just one part of the last question. My daughter is also at the middle school, and the days that she has off, her teachers are obviously teaching other students, so she doesn't have that immediacy of being able to converse. However, with Schoology, she is able to have access to her teachers at the time when their teachers are able to respond. And she gets responses from her teachers at sometimes 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night when they get around to it. And if not, their teacher approaches my daughter anyway, the next morning and says, I got your email, I got your message, this is what we need to do. So I think it's a lack of an immediacy of support, because everyone's used to hands up, teacher ask the question. I can only speak for the 6th grade teachers, but I think they're doing about as best as could possibly be imagined on this.
Thank you.
Another question, and I believe there's one or two more here from Mr. Kolakowski, but what is the plan for virtual learning when there is a necessity for students to remain home? Speaking primarily to the primary and intermediate levels, whether that be for mandatory quarantine, direct exposure, showing mild symptoms, parent choice, or have the need to be tested. Currently, there are few options, if any, in most subjects for students that are sent home for short periods of time, i.e., 7 to 10 days for mandatory quarantine in respect to any kind of direct instructional model. Students are tasked with checking Schoology for work, which is not instruction, it is merely a resource. Instruction has content, feedback, assessment, and instructional practices that cannot be replicated with work posted online. Any feedback or discussion for how this can be remedied for semester 2 is appreciated.
Well, first of all, just as Mr. Hanley mentioned, teachers getting back to students at all different times. Before I answer the question, I do want to acknowledge how hard teachers are working on and helping students who are on mandated absences and quarantines in terms of reaching out to them, providing links to meets to have discussions. We've heard stories of teachers driving to students' homes to drop off materials when they don't have materials. So I do want to mention that. We are currently working on some plans that go beyond checking Schoology for instruction when students are quarantined or on mandatory absences because they have symptoms and are need to be tested. As we work through the plans, I will be able to share more information in the future.
Yes, that is something that I know we've actively discussed working on. And a final question here from Mr. Kolakowski is, will the district consider the implementation of a hybrid model or synchronous learning opportunity for its students for at least the grades 6 through 12 that will no doubt continue to be necessitated by the pandemic to pivot in and out of the classroom between in-person and virtual instruction, with the new threat of viral variants and the like on the horizon, threatening another possible spike and unfortunate continuance of the pandemic until a time unknown at this point. We're over the hurdle where technology is not available nor out of reach budgetarily. However, there cannot be an expectation that staff know how to blend the virtual world with that of in-person learning without proper training and support for utilizing best practices in such an instructional model. Thank you for your thoughtful insight and discussion on behalf of our students and staff. Your efforts are more than appreciated.
So first of all, in response to this question, this is a good time for me to give a shout out and thank you to Jensen Giacomo, our instructional technology integration specialist, who has just been working so hard with teachers, with parents, helping students connect, and she provides professional development on a variety of topics, and her latest round of professional development has focused on live streaming. She's available for individual appointments, which I'm looking to take her up on some training, so Mrs. Carey will have to help me like she did earlier today to get up and going. So I did want to mention her. Technology, we're getting better in that area. You've heard that we have been putting Chromebooks in the hands of more and more students, which is fantastic. We still have some gaps in terms of our technology for teachers. We're working on hardware Chromebooks, more newer devices. So there is still a gap in that area. We're working through plans to be able to provide those additional supports. In terms of looking at our models, I think that ties in with an earlier question in terms of assessing how we're doing, having conversations, and then looking at all the logistical considerations that would be involved. But we're always open to examine things, to grow, to learn. I'm not sure if anyone else has any comments, or Mr. Nolan, if you have any comments.
Yeah, I mean, specifically about the like hybrid model or synchronous learning, we have had cursory conversations about, what other districts are doing, what we can do, how we can do it better. Obviously, it was mentioned in one of the comments that we were starting out in September trying to, fly by the seat of our pants and just figure things out the best that we thought we could. And certainly we are having conversations about ways we can improve things, but it is complex, and in some certain areas, we're working with lots of other groups and organizations and trying to figure out the best things together. And so it is, complex, and we're really trying to work with everybody.
Again, I know I mentioned teachers. I want to give credit to teachers and administrators for just, all their flexibility. And this has been, if you think about last year to this, look at our meetings, even how we've changed and how we've refined as we grow. And I think that's something that we will continue to do. And sometimes now it's starting to, we're starting to make it look easy, which is a good thing, but it is not easy. It takes a tremendous amount of effort. So again, I want to thank everyone for the project. And thank you to the board for all you do to support. Oh, and the board there too, I'm sorry.
It was a collective sweep.
This is the only kind of board meeting I've ever done, so I think.
Yeah, and I would say, just to answer like the synchronous learning opportunity, that's not something the district is really capable of pulling the trigger on. If we couldn't, we just aren't prepared or able really to say next week if we wanted everything to be synchronous that we could do that. It is something we've had some light discussions about as we learn from everybody. But for across the board, for every teacher across the district, it's not something that we can really do at this time. We did have one other community question that came in. which was actually right at the end of our last meeting, and we answered it towards the beginning, but I just wanted to call it out again specifically, which was, did the Board of Education discuss COVID testing students and staff in the schools like other capital region schools such as Guilderland, Albany, Bethlehem, et cetera are? And Mr. Say, you touched on this early in the presentation, but if you just wanted to recap again what we're looking at.
So we are beginning by testing students at the high school. I believe the Tuesday we come back from vacation, students that are in attendance on that day. And again, we've had a number of parents who have committed to have their students tested, but that was when it was potentially a requirement for 20% to stay open. So because this is surveillance testing, we will be sending parent squares to any of the students who are randomly selected to their parents to ensure that that's something that they still want to have happen. We have plans in place, and then from there we'll assess, determine how it went, how long it takes, and then formulate a plan for the future. In terms of staff, we decided to start with students at this time, and then we can continue those discussions as well. Right now, hopefully staff are starting to be able to get some of the vaccines, and but we will have those discussions with teachers as well.
Thank you. With that, if there's no further questions or comments from board members, then
Matt,
go ahead.
I would like to add something, Matt. I'm sorry. I was just waiting for the right time. I know that we're talking, or they're talking about another spike with another virus coming, but when I listened to Kevin's comments and the other parents, it's so hard to have a discussion, a productive discussion, when somebody's reading your comments. You know what I'm saying? I would like to, I'm being optimistic, but I would like to think that before we end the year, that we could figure out some way for us to meet in the auditorium to allow a certain amount of people into that auditorium where they can address their issues. I mean, Kevin makes a lot of great points there. And, you know, when you have middle school and high school students, and so many of these parents are so frustrated because their kids they just can't do this. They just can't do it. Every child doesn't learn the same way. And I think we've got to start thinking about letting some of these parents come to a board meeting and address their concerns in person. There's no discussion here. You read Kevin's comments. That's all you can do. And then, you know, Miss O'Shea responds and as best as she can, of course, and there's no discussion. That's the end of it. And parents have questions and they want to talk about them. They have concerns. And I think I really would hope before this school year ends, and sooner rather than later, that we can again talk about, I don't know, a lottery. I don't know how we would do it, but I feel we can get 25 or 30 people into that auditorium and be socially distant. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I just keep hearing the same concerns. These kids are struggling. Not all, but many, several, maybe the majority. They're not learning the same way, and it's different. And I know it's a national, international concern, but I'm concerned about our kids here right now. And I'm concerned for these parents who are struggling to teach their children. You can't teach your own children. They don't focus the same way. We have parents hiring tutors, and that's not right. I mean, I don't know. We've just got to address these concerns a little better. I feel we can do better. I really do. I think we can do better. I know we're working hard, but I think we can do better. Are there thoughts about us maybe having a meeting where we would allow a certain amount of people in?
So I think at the, back in October, we had started to plan to go in that direction, and we were talking about logistics.
We
and
did.
And then the metrics started to.
Yes.
The positive.
Thanksgiving.
Great.
Yes, that's correct.
So, you know, and I think for the future, as we continue to look at the positivity rates and things like that, that's definitely something we can all discuss. I just also want to encourage, I mean, I would be happy to talk with parents on the phone, to meet with parents virtually, principals, you know, teachers, principals. So please feel free to contact, but to Sue's point, yeah, the best conversations are two-way conversations and not just reading questions and answering. I know at one point we had some virtual parent forums. Again, the dialogue was limited to submission of comments, but I'd be happy to explore. And I think we talked about a survey earlier. I think a survey is another way to really give some feedback and hear, as long as there are perhaps some open-ended questions. We'll have to design that. That's another way as well. But your point is well taken.
And I know we did talk about it earlier in the year, and yes, the virus did spike at that point. And I know you're willing to talk to parents, but you know, some parents, you know, after hearing Kevin's concerns tonight, some parents might be sitting there going, yeah, I mean, that's a question I didn't think of. You know, when they call you and talk to you, or you meet with 3 or 4 people, there are so many parents that don't even know what to ask anymore. They're just so confused themselves. I'm a little confused for them. I mean, I don't have answers for them. I don't have answers. I never had to do this. Nobody's had to do this before. And I'm not saying you're not open to discussions with parents. Of course, you're available all the time. We know that. But I just want to bring this back to the table about somehow meeting where these parents can look at us and talk to us and not just have a comment read. They can't attend our meetings. And they deserve to be able to attend our meetings. They're the ones with the kids who are struggling. And we just need to do better on that too. I feel we have to help these people out. I'm frustrated for them. And that's all. I'm rant over. Sorry.
No reason to be sorry.
I'm so frustrated.
I understand Sue's concerns, and I still think in this pandemic we don't know about these variants. There's still a lot of unknowns. I think we still need to be as careful as we can. But we've all heard from parents that are just having a terrible problem dealing with this. I think that the communication, I'd rather see them able to communicate more with a building principal, with their teacher. And again, everyone's open to contact the school board, but it's just a huge management issue. How do we manage this? And remote learning is never going to be. I mean, we'll do the best we can. Everybody is. It will never be the same as being in a classroom. And there's just one of the tragedies of this whole COVID situation is the loss of instruction. You can't replicate a classroom, as you know, a veteran teacher on a screen.
No.
And there's going to be limits till we get through this, to what we can do. But in the meantime, I think the more we can facilitate communication with the teachers, with the principals, I mean, that's really where that's where the angst is that these poor parents, they don't, how do I do this? You know, they're not teachers. How do I do this? And bringing their concerns to the school board is fine. They have a right to do that. But I don't think that's the immediate issue. The immediate issue is they need to communicate with teachers, with principals, and somehow get some help struggling through this situation. But I think when we can meet publicly again, bring people back in, we should, but I just urge caution. I think this COVID's not done with us yet.
I'm not saying it is, Mark. I just, I feel there are things happening in every community where social distancing is also happening. I mean, I'm cautious, you're cautious, you and I are both, virtual remote tonight. We're being cautious, but I feel that some of these parents are willing to meet, are willing to come forward. And it doesn't have to be with the board, but with the principals, I don't know. There's a group of parents out there that really want to be heard because it's their child's education, and you can't buy back first grade. You can't buy back 8th grade.
And I no one can argue with any of this.
Yeah.
And I respect people's right to communicate with the school board, but I'm just hoping that these parents are exercising the options they do have to reach out to their principals, to reach out to their teachers. And I think the more communication, the better. I get the sense that our managers, our teachers are really trying, but I don't have any easy answers. I would just encourage, when I hear from parents, I encourage them, please do everything you can to reach out to your teacher, to reach out to your principal. And it's an awful situation that they're all in.
Yes, definitely.
I do think that there are, and we can certainly look at what, when and how we might be able to do, forums either on like a building or building level or other initiatives. I think that those are things we can definitely look at. In the meantime, I do think Mark has a good point, and Peggy brought this up about reaching out to the building principals and Miss O'Shea if need be as well. Whether you can have these maybe like one-on-one phone, digital call, video calls, or maybe even small groups of 3 to 5 people. Getting them together, parents, to ask questions together in small groups. I know I've seen that successful before. I think that there are things we can do safely to get people's questions and concerns heard so that they're feeling like they're valued, and because they know what's happening at home, and they do have a certain perspective and voice to share, because there were a lot of good points in there and a lot of ways we can definitely improve moving forward. So I'll just summarize that to say, I think we will, as a board, look at or ask the district leadership team to look at what kinds of safe community forums we can hold, whether digitally or in person, if that's appropriate, or whether it's building by building. However, we can get these voices. Surveys, we've talked about that as one avenue. There are a lot of different avenues here, and we've talked about like virtual coffee or things like that in the past. So just making sure we're on the ball with these two-way communication channels.
And I also want to add, it's the parents and the students, but the principals and teachers, they're struggling too. The whole educational community is struggling. It's not just parents and kids. It's everybody, the administrators, everybody. So I just feel some kind of communication has to happen somehow, besides via email.
I know it's difficult with public, opening public things and the opportunities for folks to crash calls and cause mayhem and all sorts of things. But one of the nice things that I've seen at my workplace is every Thursday, one of our executive producers hosts just like a little chat, and we'll just talk about some work-related stuff, but also other miscellaneous, whatever people want to talk about on their mind, whether it's a new movie or TV show or something. And doing something that for teachers, or even just parents, like, hey, here are a couple of things the district did this week. Other just kind of ways where people can just sit there and listen, if they want, or they can chime in and ask a question. and just sort of humanizing. And it's important for us at work because it's easy to forget, somebody's on the other end of a keyboard, we're all people here, and doing work remotely is challenging like learning at home is. So I just think there are a lot of options out there that we can consider to try to get us to connect and remember that we're all people here.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, and I just double checked the BOE comment email. We have no other further comments for this evening. With that, we do have the first reading of some updates to the mission statement and vision, commitments and beliefs that the board has talked about previously. So that's on the policy review for this meeting. And then our next meeting is February 24th at 6 o'clock. And at this point, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn at 7:55.
I'll make that.
Second.
Mr. Pascal,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dion,
Yes.
Mrs. Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Annaly,
Yes.
Mr. Nolan.
Yes. Thank you again, everyone, and everyone especially that contributed questions and comments. This was brought up. It's important to share your concerns and thoughts, and we really appreciate you all doing that, and we'll hope you continue to connect with folks in the district, whether principals, teachers, or district leadership, to make sure that you're heard and you can help us all together make this the best that we can. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.